So happy to be here in Alicante. It's really special to me because I've been here before. Here's me in the 80s. I was a foreign exchange student here. And when I got the invitation to come to Alicante, I was like, wow, I'd love to come back to Alicante. I'd love to come back to España. So, yo hablo español, pero ahora en inglés. So the topic is dynamic reteaming. And I'm going to give you an introduction to this topic. But before we get into it, I don't know about you. I've been working in software companies about 20 years. I want to learn and get better at what I do. So I'm always reading. I'm going to conferences, I'm studying. And I've been hearing stuff like this for years. The best teams, the high-performing teams, are the ones that stay the same, that don't change. Like this is the goal. So I always kind of took note of that, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Is that really true? Because my experience had been a little bit different. I've heard stuff like this as well, getting into Agile. We're talking about machines yesterday with Lisa's talk. But there's always been an influence that I've learned that's like, okay, you want to get the people up and running, and you kind of monitor the progress. It always kind of felt a little bit like, wait a minute, where are the humans? My world has been different. My world has looked like this one. Maybe it looks familiar to you too. It kind of moves and it changes. So the goal of keeping things the same never really quite sat well for me. It's like, are we doing it wrong? So I'm talking about dynamic reteaming. In its essence, it's about team change. So I'm curious how it's been for you. So, can you stand up if you've had a new person join your team in the past month? Stand up if you've had a new person join your team in the past month. Okay, look around. Okay, you can sit down. Okay. Now, let's try the flip of that. Add one person to a team, it's a new team, right? All right, stand up if someone has left your team in the past month. Maybe they went to a different team or a different company. Okay, take a look. Okay, I do this all over the world, and I get a very similar result because really, if you think about it, team change is inevitable, so you might as well get good at it. People are going to come and go from our teams. So I think the focus needs to shift a bit. The focus needs to shift from keep it all the same. I mean, whose reality is that? To let's get good at dealing with what we're going through, which is team change. It could be small changes, like one person in and out, or it could be bigger. And there are different techniques for either situation. So at the kind of reteaming at the edges, the smallest case, you add a new person, and your team system is different. Remember yesterday with the yarn, Lisa had us do this activity to kind of visualize the team system? If you had a new person come in after your web was already created, that web was going to be different. It only takes one person to change a team system. And new ideas are added to the team, different personality, differences of opinion, skills, points of view. When Paul here joined a company that I was at, this guy stood on tables. Nobody really did that before. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's like incredible. Look, he's facilitating a large group of people, trying to get their attention. He was standing on a table. He changed our team system. Not only our small group that we were a part of together, but also he made a wider impact. So on the flip side, you lose a person. If somebody leaves your team, it's different. So it's kind of like what leaves with them. And the more people that leave, it feels even more different. So maybe it feels like the identity of the team is different or changing. Sometimes people rebrand their teams. They give the team a new name. But what else leaves? This is Tim in the back there. when he joined one of the startups that I was at, we always focus on the whole person. We encourage people to share their interests. He got us all juggling. We'd be pair programming, we'd be taking breaks, we'd have a juggling competition. When Tim left, sadly, there was less juggling. Sometimes it really hurts when people leave. Now, this is not all stories. It's a lot of stories of love and loss with reteaming. When a founder left this first startup that I was at, Expert City, it hurt. We did everything we could to try to make the transition as smooth as possible, but it wasn't easy. And it was very challenging for us. So sometimes it really hurts. On the other hand, sometimes we're glad they're gone. Sometimes we work with people that are annoying. It's a fact. You don't know it when you're, in the beginning, but sometimes we don't really miss them. I see some smiles in the audience. It's a thing. Sometimes we need change. Imagine if you're with the same people all the time, all the time, all the time. We learn from different people. So it's okay. It's okay for us to not really miss people. But then, I hear all these things like, wait, the best teams are the ones that are staying together for a long time. We got to give these teams times to gel. Almost warning symbols. Watch out. If your team changes, your velocity is going to go down. I always thought this was kind of like missing the mark a bit, like fear tactics for team building. I don't know. It doesn't really set with me. You're going to lose predictability if your teams change. So it's like a lot of warnings. I've always focused more on the human side, and when you do that, I think a lot of this stuff kind of goes away. It's like, what perspective do you want to come from with your teams? And then I've thought to myself, okay, well, when you change your teams or when your teams change on you, you're not doing it wrong. Again, it's the reality for many of us. We are standing up in here, we have dynamic, changing teams. So you're not doing it wrong if your teams change. It could actually be the secret to your success. This is the first startup I was at. I was the 15th employee. I was there for about 8 years. We invented products that are very well known and popular today. Lots of changes throughout this company over the years. We invented GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting. We grew and changed from 15 to, I think when I left, there were about 850, and then they grew on and on. We were acquired at one point for a sizable amount of money. We were really proud of that. And then again, this was last year, the legacy of that company was acquired by LogMeIn for a great deal of money. The second startup I was at here, I was the 10th employee. I was there for 9 years. I left when there were about 600. And we changed a lot more at this company. We were agile from the start with XP, some Scrum, and I was there from 1 team to 30 teams in the engineering department. And by design, we did a lot of dynamic reteaming. This is Zapfolio. And this company went public in June of 2015. Again, two companies so far, very successful companies with deliberate changes that happened, a lot due to growth. I'm at another company right now. I'm an internal person. It's called Procore. I joined, there was an article I read yesterday. In the past year, this company added 900 people. The value of the company is currently $3 billion. There's an article yesterday in TechCrunch. So I've been there for about 1.5 years, and I've been working in the engineering group. There's about 350 of us in R&D, and we have a dynamically changing environment as well. I'm very proud of Procore. I thank Procore for sponsoring my travel. We make software for the construction industry and are really doing a lot to try to improve the lives of people in construction. So it's a really awesome mission to be a part of. So we make tools for subcontractors, general contractors, all people involved in the ecosystem of construction. So you can be on a job site, you can look at the blueprints for your building on your phone, on your mobile, and there's other project management and financial tools as well. So thanks, Procore. Love being part of this company. Growing and changing really fast. So I became curious about this stuff. The act of writing dynamic reteaming has been like a big retrospective for me. I look back on my career, again, it's been 20 years. I've been at these 3 companies. I also consulted at other companies. But I became curious. Was team change just something happening in California? Was it just something that I had coincidentally experienced? So I became curious, and I decided to do some research. So I started interviewing people from different parts of the world. And then I wrote this book to summarize the findings of my research. It's called Dynamic Reteaming. It's an electronic book on LeanPub. And so basically what I did is I had conversations with people and I recorded them, transcribed the conversations and coded them for themes, and I wrote about the themes. And the result is 4 patterns of team change, 4 patterns of dynamic reteaming. My background, I studied linguistics, and what we would do in linguistics is we would transcribe languages using the International Phonetic Alphabet. We'd code them for themes, and we'd write about the patterns in the data. So I did the same thing, but just about teams. So it's the subject of this talk. So let's dig in. So we're going to talk about an eco-cycle. This is a context tool. It's a metaphor. There was a talk yesterday on metaphors. And it's from a book called Panarchy by Gunderson and Halling. It's also written about in an awesome book that I highly recommend called Liberating Structures, Keith McCandless. You can use this to apply to work. So teams age and change, okay? And we can look at this eco-cycle. Again, it's a metaphor from nature as opposed to a metaphor of a factory or machine. So it's kind of another perspective or vantage point that I also share. So kind of like an acorn or a new growth in the forest, teams go through kind of a birth phase when you have like a new team. Maybe you get to adolescence and the tree starts to grow. If you're in a poverty trap, maybe not. Maybe some sort of failure to thrive. And as time goes on with some additional growth, you get to maturity. And then maybe as some things happen in nature, I'm from California. I live near Thousand Oaks, California, in Newbury Park. We had wildfires just recently. So it's a big disruption to our community and the system. Could be very devastating. But some kind of creative destruction. Sometimes you could also sort of get stuck, as we'll see, with a rigidity trap or a period of stagnation. If you imagine, if you have a team and you feel like, gosh, where's the energy of this team? Feels like could be because it's been together for so long, and so the energy is flat, like stagnating. So we're going to use this metaphor through the rest of the talk. So it's also at different levels. Maybe you'll have changes at the company level. I was telling you about the first startup I was part of, Expert City, that was acquired by Citrix, later acquired by LogMe, and these are changes at a higher level, like a company level. You might have changes at a department level. Have you ever been at a company, you're working in component-based teams, and someone decides, we're going to reorganize according to products? Maybe that's at that. Could be at the company level or department level, depending on the impact. Could be a tribe level, groups of squads or teams, or at the team level. It could be that you have more sort of stability at a company level, but you're growing so fast that the teams are changing a lot. So maybe there's different rates of change depending on these different levels. This is called Panarchy, by the way. You can read about it in the book, Panarchy. And even at the person level, if you think to yourself, maybe you just joined your company, so it's kind of like that birth phase for you. Maybe you're at a company 8 years, 12 years, more of a maturity. So it happens at different levels. The manner to which reteaming happens can also vary. And depending on how it goes down, it can feel a lot different. This is from Sam Kainer, who wrote another book. He wrote an awesome book called A Facilitator's Guide to participatory decision making. He has this picture in his book when he's talking about decision making. I find it very handy when talking about reteaming and reorgs in general, team change in general. Maybe it's a top-down change. Your company's going to fail and you need to pivot. Somebody's going to make a decision. You're going to try to move fast. It's a top-down change. Doesn't always feel so great if somebody comes in from the outside of your team, starts moving people around. This one is when somebody is the decision maker and they're getting input and then making a decision. I've seen this a lot with over the years with managers who talk with people about, oh, would you like a change? You know, they kind of negotiate a change, they get kind of input. Or we have this problem to solve in our organizational structure, we're going to get input, but we're going to make the decision. Having clarity about which decision-making structure you're using is helpful. And then this one is kind of like the team is deciding. We see this a lot in Agile, I think, when you're trying to, maybe you have no clear decision maker, but the team is trying to negotiate something. So how it goes down might be different. So dynamic reteaming is team change. People have asked me, okay, Heidi, how do I do it? And I'm not saying go bust up your teams. I'm not saying change your teams now. That's not what I'm saying. What I've noticed from the research and experience is that this is a thing that happens, so we might as well get good at it. Might not be right for you next week to go change your team, so use care and caution with this stuff. Okay, so we apply patterns to solve problems. If you want to do it, this is how you do it. So I'm going to talk about five problems and 4 patterns. Okay, so that's the structure of the rest of this. So the first one is, let's say you're in a situation where you have to pivot. So could be some kind of emergency situation, like you have some kind of performance crisis with your software. Isolation is the first pattern. So it's the first reteaming pattern I'll explain. So when I was at the first startup here, I thought we were a big company in this picture, that we had grown so much. Well, we were going to change the world. I was part of the web development team at this company, and we had this screen sharing technology that was just amazing. You could see and control somebody's computer from a distance. So we were applying it to tech support. So we made this marketplace for live tech support. So if you had a problem on your computer, you could come to our website, type in your problem. You could select an expert who would connect to your computer and see and control your computer to solve your problem. We were going to change the world. We were super excited about this. Here I am in my office. We got all the web flows on the wall. We're like, it was motivating. I mean, this was like, did you ever have a job and it felt like just so incredible to you, so motivating, that you worked extra? I mean, we worked so hard, but it was a joy. But one day, things changed, because we had one little teeny tiny problem. And the problem was nobody was buying our service. So we learned a very, very important lesson at this first startup, which was like, you don't build it and then try to sell it. First, you validate whether you have a market. You sell the idea, convince yourself that, okay, if we spend, what was this, $10 million initially, somebody's going to buy it. Like, you got to make sure. Do that risk management. We learned this visceral lesson about market validation. But the reteaming that happened here was this pivot. Now, this is all it was before Lean Startup. That book hadn't come out. We became students of Steve Blank. At the time, he had a book called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. Now it's called the Startup Owner's Manual. It's been revised. So the reteaming that happened was very specific. And I didn't call it a reteaming back then. I didn't notice. I was one of the team members. So isolation, you have some existing teams, and just like it sounds, you bring some teams over to the side. I was part of this team for this pivot. So we had these existing teams. We were component-based teams. Our founder brought some people over to this team on the side. And so the key with isolation is you want to form a team. You want to isolate the team, move them to a different place, maybe in your building, so it feels different. And you want to give process freedom. Back at this time, we were doing waterfall software development. I think this was 2000 maybe, or 99. I can't remember the exact year. But we were given process freedom. We didn't have to do things the same as everybody else had to do. We got to move really fast. And then the team was dissolved. So isolation, take a team off to the side, give process freedom. That's really important because a lot of the times when you're doing work with isolation like this is a beneficial silo. Not all silos are bad. This is an intentional silo. You need a different sort of cadence when you're doing this work. The cadence of the regular development team was too slow for us. We had to act fast. We were trying to save this company. This is the picture of us on our release night. We created this product called Go to My PC, where you could see and operate your computer remotely. But this was, again, the method, the way that this happened was a very deliberate change. It was an emergency situation. I mean, were we going to be around? We had to do this other thing, and it happened really fast. So if we take a look at our eco cycle, just for the context of this, we had the team off to the side, this team that emerged, kind of like a new team. It was a new team. And we got to about probably here. Then we accomplished our mission. We got the first version of this thing out. And then that work happened to fold back into the regular glacial pace of development. But actually, if you're at a company that's been around for a while, and I was at, part of being at the second startup, I saw the isolation pattern happen again to spawn a new product. Team was invited, taken to the side, given process freedom. In this case, this team was liberated from Scrum, and they were a 2-week cadence to develop a new product was way too slow. We needed more hourly feedback loops. And this new product was created called SecureDocs, which branched off to another company that lives on in Santa Barbara. So to get better at the isolation reteaming, these are some suggestions. So moving to a different work area, giving process freedom, allowing for different cadences. Now I have considered maintenance here as an important point. You can move fast if people move off to the side and do things, but if they're building things that other people need to maintain, or you don't work out the maintenance of the software or how you're going to keep updating it, you could have a lot of conflicts. So this is something that you have to use with care. A lot of these are kind of like, you got to be very organized with how you go about it, very deliberate about it. So the second pattern. Do you ever work in a company and you get this mandate to grow and they say, we are building a big company and you will grow? Is that true for anyone? So you're kind of like, okay, all right, commence the hiring. So it's kind of like this. This is the 1-by-1 pattern. It seems like an obvious pattern. You try to hire a lot of people as fast as you can and you add people 1-by-1. I guess it doesn't have to be fast to be 1-by-1, but you're just kind of adding people and you're integrating them into your structure. It helps to do pairing. Mentor programs are helpful with onboarding people for one-on-one. So a lot of the best practices or things with one-on-one deal with you have an existing team, you're adding a new person to the team, you want to integrate them into that existing structure. So the mentors are the first pair. Sometimes you have issues and you have to handle it differently when multiple people arrived. These people arrived in one day, and so what we did was we spread them across teams. Here the horizontal lines are different teams. So you kind of spread the load, so to speak. You spread the people across the different teams. We would implement feedback loops to learn how to get better at this. We'd have mentor. Each new hire was paired with a mentor, like I said, for the pairing, getting the development environment set up, et cetera. And we'd have retrospectives with the mentors. How's it going? And we'd learn newer, better ways to be mentors. And then we'd get the new hires together and we'd learn new things and we'd iterate the way that this program worked. So we had boot camps emerge, which other companies do as well, which make it easier to, like, if everybody has to set up their dev environment, they might as well do it together. You can do some things in a batch to be more efficient. But the point is we would learn, and then these people would then go to their teams, and then they could be further along. And then we learned through reflection again that that wasn't good enough. We wanted them, the new hires, to meet more than just the people on their teams and each other. So we'd have a project for them to do together as they were onboarding. And then we got volunteer developers who would come and they would pair with the new hires on their projects. And so then when the new hires later went to their teams, they had made more connections. And so this was really important, because when your company is growing fast, if you can try to accelerate the number of relationships that people form, it can be better for them later. And at this company, we had collective code ownership. So you might be working over here in the code or over here. And so if we would say it could break the ice. So it could just proactively help people build relationships. So to get better at one-on-one, these are some recommendations. Building in a feedback loop for how it's going when you're adding the new people. I can't emphasize that enough. We would have new hire retrospectives. Every 3 months after you started, you'd get together, have a retrospective. 6 months, you'd have a retrospective. And it was so exciting to share with our new hires. We made these changes to our onboarding based on your feedback. And then they'd get involved and later become mentors. A lot of the times, people that haven't been at the company very long make excellent mentors. They can empathize with the new hires because they were just there. We generate improvements. Sometimes with the growth, though, it could result in this. So problems unique to growth, you know. Sometimes you have concerns of the first team. Now, I was on the first team or the original team at 2 startups, as I told you about. And then as the company starts growing, it's kind of an interesting situation there because it feels different for the people from the first team. It can get a bit confusing as well, especially for the new people. The new people are kind of like, well, what am I allowed to do? They don't want to make a mistake or step on someone's toes. Like, who owns that thing? Is that her job? Can I do that? I see an opportunity. Is it okay if I do this? There's like a hesitancy. And then some people say, just wait a while and observe before you start doing anything. So you get all these signals like, is it okay? But then the people that have been there for a while are like, why aren't these people taking initiative? Why aren't they stepping up? So you hear these two different voices in this larger system. And I've been coaching people that are going through this now. So I'm kind of on the other side, joining the 3rd company a bit later. And then they always ask this. People always ask this question. And they use the word maintain. I don't know what they would say in Spanish, but they say, how do we maintain our culture? There's a feeling of things are changed, things are different, and it's true. Remember, the teams age and change from that eco cycle. Things aren't going to be the same as they were before. So, what are you going to do? So tactics to get better at growth. One of the things that I like to do is really promote the idea that, you know what? This is our company. Sometimes when you're in the beginning as a company, you feel such ownership of the company. You care so deeply about it. But the people that just joined the company also want to help it be successful. So this is our company. So how do you kind of bring that together? This is an activity I love to do with teams. It's inspired by an activity I learned from someone in ORSC, Organizational Relationship Systems Coaching, Lisa also mentioned yesterday. This is a group of mobile developers. Everybody stood up and I said, make a line in terms of when you joined the company. So on the left side, they joined very early. On the right side, maybe they joined a month ago. And they talk to each other, they line up. They make a timeline, they put their start dates on the timeline and other significant events, and then I have them, starting from the earliest joiners, in pairs, they tell the story of the team, and they also talk about why they joined the company. So you hear the origin stories, and when you anchor to that, you kind of raise the positivity in the situation, And it kind of like helps people along. So the people that just joined hear some of the earlier stories, and then the people that are there for a long time hear about why the newer people join the company. So it kind of raises the positivity. And that's what we want to do. The other thing you can do when you have a lot of growth is help people find each other through something like an open space. We had an open space, we posed a challenge, how can we improve collaboration, is one thing you could ask. And then the people formed 80 open space sessions. It's an unconference, and they solve the problem. They create guilds so that some of the newer people in the company and the people that have been there for a while find common causes, and then we have these guilds or these special interest groups, working groups, to improve the company. So you want to create situations where the people can know each other and not be strangers. Third pattern, it's too big. Okay, so the problem is sometimes things get big. One of the most common reteaming patterns I've seen in the industry is called grow and split. Okay? So when teams grow big, it's almost a kind of rigidity trap. It could feel like there are problems that weren't there before. Like this team, suddenly this stand-up meeting is taking much longer than it did. I see some head noddings. It used to be 10 minutes, now it's a half hour. And this person doesn't care about what this person is working on because the work has gotten so separated. So planning takes forever. Yeah, if you do like sprint planning, that's worse because that's like a lot of pain. People aren't paying attention to each other. You want to bring your computer in so you can code during the sprint planning so you use the time well, but that's socially awkward, so you can't necessarily do that, so then you're a prisoner in the meeting. So it's harder to make decisions too. Work can become unrelated. And so growing and splitting is something that tends to happen. I've seen teams initiate the split. I've seen helpful people on the side say, hey, do you think you guys might be effective if you split, if you became two teams? Sometimes teams rebrand themselves. These teams, after they did a split, they came up with geeky twists on band names, Hex Pistols, we had Ace of Rebase. New team identities. This is a picture of a cake. My friend Rachel Davies was at a company in London called Unruly. When their team split, they marked the event with a cake. They had fun with it. The splitting of the fellowship, it was a Lord of the Rings inspired cake. They had fun with it. You know, you can mark the event. So then I asked myself, okay, well, why? Why does this stuff happen? You know, is it because we're trying to do better? Is it because we heard and we read that maybe the best teams are a smaller size? Maybe that's why we do it. Maybe it could be because we are just inexperienced with facilitation. If you have to facilitate a large group of people, there are certain ways you can do it and you can get good at it, but it's not a common skill that everyone has. And then I asked myself, well, wait a minute, large teams work too. I've been in situations like here. Actually, this is a picture from a friend, William Them, who I interviewed for the book, and he was at a company in New Zealand called Trade Me, and they combined the teams. They were porting some functionality from one language to another, and they were knocking off things in the list, and they wanted to do pair programming and switch pairs. And so they'd come to this whiteboard, and they'd pair and switch pairs, and they thought, when we do that, we want a larger group of people to do it with. So large teams work too. You know, so then I think, well, okay, well, who decides any of this stuff? And what if the team decides, right? So you can have a retrospective about the team composition. I think this is one of the forgotten things in Agile. Remember at the beginning, and I was like, everybody says keep the teams the same so you have predictability and all this stuff. But wait, this is a lever that we can use as a team to decide if we're going to pursue excellence, if we're going to try to get better at what we do, maybe us as the team might think if we change our composition, we could be more effective. So why not? Why not give teams the freedom to do that? I was with a team once. They felt like they were pretty big. They decided, okay, maybe we should split. But then the team dreamed up the idea of, okay, we're building web software, we're building mobile software. And so the two of the people that were working on the iOS app decided, we're going to follow the priority. And so we're going to be with this team when they have a higher priority, and this team with a higher priority, and this team with a higher priority. So you think maybe, okay, Heidi, was this effective? How did they do? The fact was that the point of this story is that the team got to own it. They got to decide that we're going to do this interesting structure, and we're going to try it, and then we're going to reflect, and we're going to change and do something different. They wound up splitting. But the point is, they had the autonomy to make that decision because they were pursuing excellence. And I think that's the key here. So to get better at grow and split, so don't share team members. Sometimes when you split, what are you going to have suddenly hire a new product owner? Sometimes they need to be shared. That can be awkward, it can be challenging. Not necessarily the best solution. Okay? Avoid creating dependencies. Sometimes when these teams split, suddenly they have new dependencies to manage that they didn't have before. Maybe it's easier to stay together. Don't drag it out. I've seen teams it's like, okay, rip the Band-Aid off already. You're talking for 3 weeks about how you're going to split. Just go split. All right, what does that mean? You might have to change desks. Maybe you have a new location. Maybe you have new remote team members, so you have to reset the way that you work. We would have, at the second startup I was at, we would have checklists for whenever the teams would split or change. New chat channel, new email, new this, new that. Reset the calendars and tools. So split teams are new teams. We would do team reset activities and treat them like new teams. So we would reset on the people and relationship, the work, and the workflow. These are some of the specific areas. So coaches could help these teams get up to speed. So focusing on relationship building is something that's always worked for me. They were on a camping trip together. We would have groups of teams get to know each other really well, and then later when they'd change teams, they already had the foundations of a relationship built. So we'd always focus on relationship building. At Procore, we have a program, it's called Get to Know You Lunch. So the company will pay for it. Anyone can have lunch with anyone else. And so it's a great way to meet people and break the ice and say, hey, let's have a get to know you lunch. So you get these invitations, and it helps to foster the relationship building. Because if you know and care about the people you work with, everything else is just easier. We would do market of skills, learn from Lisa Atkins. So you could do an activity for an hour where people share, these are my skills, these are my hobbies and interests, and I added a couple of extra things. This is what I want to learn in the next 3 months, and this is what I offer to teach you. So it helps people form connections, it raises respect. So you could do deliberate things if the team is up for it. It all depends on what the team is up for. You meet the team where they are. The other thing is like video. Turning on the video is important. I was with this one team, and one guy, I heard a dog barking. I'm like, oh, show me your dog. And he lifts up this dog, and it's a Pomeranian or something. And the other guy, who he had worked with for 5 years, he's like, oh my gosh, I have a Pomeranian also. But they never showed their video before, so they'd worked together for 5 years, didn't really know each other. So I always encourage people to turn on the video. We would determine conflict protocols, planning ahead that things might get you might have a little bit of conflict. So we agree in advance. How do we want to be when we're in conflict? You'll learn about me that I like to take a walk around the block if you have an issue with me. So this is kind of risk management for the relationship part of the teams. We would align on the work, of course. We are there to build something. What's our mission? This is an opportunity canvas from Jeff Patton. Always love using these to realign on the high level of work. We would also visualize the workflow, make team agreements based on our workflow. And then really just aligning with the team on what does it mean to have excellence, to pursue excellence? What does success look like for our team? How are we going to share out how we're doing? How are we going to measure whether we've we're building the software. Did we make a difference with the customer? But we're also building the team together. So what do we want that to be like? All right, fourth pattern. Sometimes you have the silos that are about knowledge silos. Sometimes you want to do deliberate things to spread around the information. So the pattern is switching. This guy, he had to take his laptop with him on vacation because he's the only one that knew the system, and there was an outage when he was on vacation, so he's fixing the outage when he's underwater. This is not what we want. Some sort of rigidity trap here when you have one person responsible for one area of your code or of your product, that kind of coding in silos. Some companies switch at a regular cadence. Evan Wiley is a program manager at Pivotal Cloud Foundry. He was telling me about how they deliberately switch to spread around the knowledge. He has a great experience report from the last Agile Alliance conference that talks about how they work. So they switch at a regular cadence. So the switch pattern, you're moving people around at a certain cadence to spread around the information, or to help people find fulfillment, to help people, give people an opportunity to work with other people. Because we learn from different people, and sometimes we want to work with different people. So switching is about safety and resilience, not having only one person who knows that system. So we want more than one person. We want the flexibility so we can move around. So it's about opportunity also. Visualizing the open hiring on other teams is helpful because someone might opt, hey, I'd like to do that. If people don't know about your open hiring positions in your company, they might try to find something elsewhere. So it's to your benefit to provide opportunities, spreading the knowledge, and it's good for agility. When Menlo Innovations, a company in Ann Arbor, Michigan, they have really good parity with their hiring, their onboarding, and their actual work. They switch, they pair, and they switch pairs. Everybody pairs 100% of the time. You know you're getting into that when you join the company. So they spread the information around for this kind of redundancy. Mob programming adds even more sort of fluidity. I was at Hunter Industries in Southern California, talked to Chris Lucian, the engineering director there, and he was telling me how, so they have the people that code in groups, they call it a mob programming. So they have here's a picture with two, and when they would switch, it's the engineers decide if they want to switch. If they agree between the two mobs, then they tell the manager, so it's very kind of bottoms up. And the way that they did that emerged out of a retrospective. Jim is a software engineer in Portland, has extensive knowledge of the architecture and the design of the product at the second startup I was at. So he would nomad. He would go from team to team when he would come in person to the company in California. I've seen at another company a nomading program set up, and people would almost use it to try out a different team and then later maybe switch to that team. So nomading is good for sharing information. And I encourage people, it's like, give yourself options for later. Don't be the only person who knows that system. Look out for yourself because you're not going to want to work on it forever. So to get better at switching, you can invite it, like I was saying. You could share job openings, start a nomading guild. I was at a company where the engineers, if you want to try another team, you go to this group of engineers and they broker it. They get the opportunities and they match people. You can bring it up in a retrospective. So other issues. So many of you have probably heard of this, Tuckman's model, forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. I have a picture of a waterfall because it emerged at the same time. It's very linear. But he forgot a phase, which is stagnating. Okay, when your teams are together for too long, it's another kind of like rigidity trap. And when it's with a lot of people, it can feel like the energy is really low, right? Like these guys don't look particularly enthused. They're starting to dress alike. They've just been together for too long. They want to change. So I think we can be curious, we can kind of watch the energy in the room and like help people. I think stagnation really kills engagement. You can use any of the patterns to try to break out of this sort of stagnation. But your approach matters. How it goes down matters. You know, we're talking, is it a top-down sort of reteaming? Got to have extreme caution when reteaming like that. Can be very upsetting to the people. Are you going to get input about it? Are you going to let the people decide? You know, what if the people decide? Easier maybe at the smaller levels, more at the team level. You're not going to have the team decide if your company gets acquired and how you're going to handle that. All these things are going to happen. You know, so how are your teams doing? You can look at different retention. Are you retaining people? You can poll for sentiment. There's great tools today like culture&teams. How are the people doing? You can get feedback. How is the team unit doing, the squad? You can let the feedback guide you. Okay? So reteaming is inevitable, so you might as well get good at it. People are going to come to your team. They're going to leave your team. Things are going to happen. You can also initiate it. You can also catalyze it, especially for yourself. So we went over these 5 problems and the 4 patterns: isolation, one by one, grow and split, and switching. And yeah, the book is called Dynamic Reteaming. It is on LeanPub. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak in Spain. It's just thrilling for me personally to be here. And I'm very delighted, and I look forward to talking with you at the rest of the conference. So thank you so much.